Hello guys, and welcome back to today's video. My name is Zeke, the programming guy. In today's video guys, I want to show you how to submit your podcast to Apple Podcast. Right, so it's very easy guys. Alright, so once you submit your podcast to Apple Podcast, it will be searchable on Apple, and that people can listen to it, and also you can make money from your podcast. Right, so then how can you submit your podcast to Apple Podcast? We're going to be using a podcast hosting platform to do this, right? And the name of this podcast hosting platform is podbean.com. Right, so there are still lots of other podcast hosting platform, but this one happens to be one of the best, right? So how can we go about this? Now the first step to take is to head to your browser, go to podbean.com, and then you have to create a new account on podbean.com. Right, so once you head to podbean.com, you'll find the option to create a new account. So go ahead and enter your nickname, enter your email address, your password, and check this box to confirm you're not a robot, and finally click on the create account button. Right, or rather you can continue with Google. If you have a Google account, continue with Google, or you can continue with your Apple ID by clicking on this button right here. So I prefer continue with my Google account. So continue with Google, and then we have to choose my Gmail account. Right, so once that is done, then you can now start to create a new podcast. Right, so this tab is for create a new podcast, while this other one is for import existing podcast. So you have to go with this one, create a new podcast. Tap on that. Right, so once you tap on that, here it says set up your podcast, basic information, and briefly describe what your podcast is all about. So that's basically the first thing you have to do. You have to tell people, enter information about your podcast, such as your podcast name. So let's go ahead and click on the button so that you see for yourself. Right, so here's it. So what do we have to do here? You can enter your podcast title. What would you like to be your podcast title? All right, for me, I'm going to say Zik Talk Show. I'm just going to leave it simple like this, and then you have to give a brief description about what your podcast is all about. So I can say sharing, or I can just say self improvement show. All right, so yeah, you don't have to keep it this simple. You have to go on, just give a brief description about what your show is all about. So I'm trying to keep it simple so that we can forge ahead. All right, so what's the next thing to do? Next thing to do is to enter your podcast category. So click on this drop down icon and choose your podcast category. So which category suits your podcast show? Okay, I can go with this one: education, self-improvement. All right, so what else? Yeah, we have to change the logo. Yeah, you need to look for you need to design a nice looking logo and upload. Now to change your logo, you can click on this one, select image, click on that, and make sure you have a logo already designed and saved on your device, so you can go ahead and add it. Do I have a nice looking logo? Yeah, I have this one. Yes, I'm going to use this one right now. Yeah, you can crop it if you want. Click on continue, click on update, and it will be updated. Now once that is updated, the next thing you have to do is to click on update options right here at the bottom. Tap on that, and what's the next thing to do? The next thing to do, guys, is to publish your first episode. Right, let's read this information. It says upload an audio/video file, create episode information, and publish or schedule the episode. try publishing a short trailer if you're not ready with episode. All right. So I'm going to click on new episode button, and then I can now click on this choose file to upload, and then I can upload this audio file. Make sure you have your audio file recorded and saved on your device so that I can import and add right here. Right, so what else do we have to do? So this is a file name, right? Can you edit it? You can edit this name, rather you can change the file if you want. So you can add a title. So what are we going to title this podcast? So I'm going to say for example, girls improvement talk show. All right. So the next thing is to give a description about the show, or the podcast rather. So what? Give a brief description. Okay, I can just say this show is to improve every girls out there. Yeah, I'll just leave it simple like this. So what's the next thing to do? What's the next thing? The next thing to do, guys, is to publish your podcast. So if you don't want to publish it right away, you can save it as draft so that I can edit later on and publish if you want. So I'm going to click on publish now, and then it is published for me. So now I can click on this episode tab right here, and I'm going to click on episode list, and then I'll find my episode. Here's it, Girls Improvement Talk Show. All right, now what we have to do now is to distribute our podcast. Now we have to submit, or rather distribute, to Apple Podcast. All right, so it can be indexed in Apple Music, and then it will be searchable and people can listen to it. Right, so how can we make that happen? Now if you look right here, there's this distribution tab. Tap on it and you find this podcast apps. Tap on it, and here you find the podcast apps you can submit these podcasts to. There is Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podbean app, Spotify, Amazon Music, etc. So we are interested in submitting this podcast to Apple Podcast. So I'm going to tap on this one, this plus sign right here. Here it says save your Apple Podcast URL, blah blah blah. Let's click on OK. I'll walk you through the process. Now the first step to take is to make sure your podcast meets the following conditions. So you have recorded your podcast, but you need to make sure it meets the following conditions so that it can be accepted on Apple Podcast. Now here it says publish at least one episode in Apple Podcasts supported file format. Your podcast must have a unique title. Your podcast must have a podcast description, etc. So just go ahead and read all this. All right, so we are moving to the second step, which is to submit your RSS feed to Apple Podcast. So how do we get the RSS feed? How do we get it? We can get it by going to settings. This is settings right here. I'm going to tap on settings. I'm going to click on feed, and then if you look right here, this is your RSS feed URL. So I'm going to right click on it and copy link address. Then I'll head back to distribution, click on podcast apps, click on this plus sign again, and then yeah, it says submit to Apple Podcast. So what we're going to do is to click on this button. Now you need to ensure you have an Apple ID already. Of course, make sure you have an Apple ID. So if you don't have an Apple ID, make sure you create one, right? So then click on this submit to Apple Podcast. And then to take you to Apple Podcasts Connect. Alright, so here we are. And if you look right here, this is my Apple ID signed in already. Right, I have an Apple ID. So so these are the podcasts I've already submitted right here. So if you look right here, there's a plus sign right here. Tap on that and select new show. And here it says add a show with RSS feed. Yeah, this other one says add a show without an RSS feed. Right, so we're going to choose the first one and click on next. And here we need to enter the RSS feed. So I'm going to do Control V, and then I'll click on add. So after adding, what else? So after adding, guys, you need to enter this information right here. Yes, it's content rights. Show this now. Show that content third party. All right, select the first one, and then you have to enter your show contact. Now Apple needs to contact you in case if they need to. Right, so what's your name? Your email address, and lastly your phone number. And then what else? Now you need to click on this save. All right, click on this click on save. And once that is saved, then click on availability, click on that, and then you need to fill out these information as well. Yes, it says country or region. Choose where you want this show to be available, to make your show available in specific country or region. So I will choose the first one, make the show available in all countries. Right, there's nothing much to change right here. So this one says show release. Now when do you want the show to be released? Is it today? Yeah, I prefer setting it to be today, or you can select the second one so that you can schedule it to any date you want. So I'm going to leave it to be the first one. Alright, so what else? Nothing much. Alright, so that's it. So I'm going to click on episode, and then click on show. Alright, let me go to podcast at the top, and as you can see, the podcast has been added, which is this one right here. So what's going to happen right now is that it normally takes 48 hours for your podcast to be indexed in Apple Music, and then it will be now available in Apple Music so that you can search for it by the title, and then you can listen to it. So guys, so that's why you need to have a unique podcast title, so that when you tell people about your podcast, they can search for it and they can listen to your podcast. So that's it. Alright guys, so this is how to submit your podcast to Apple Podcast. Hope this video was helpful. If it was, give this video a like and equally subscribe to get more helpful tips like this. In case if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section below, and I will respond to it as soon as I can. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in my next video.